Ladies and gentlemen, members of the public, welcome to this Planning and Licensing Committee, and again, members of the public who've joined us via Zoom. Welcome also to Mr. Hodgett back in person to enlighten us. And again, if you would be certain, please, to switch your microphone on because members of the public listening in need to be able to hear what you have to say. Before I start the agenda properly, again, for benefit of members of the public, we are voting 9 tonight. The reason for that is that Councillor Bull was unable to attend the first part of the meeting, so therefore couldn't take any part in this meeting. Councillors Cross and Paul Brown both declared interest, and so therefore clearly it wouldn't be necessary for them to attend this evening. So that's the members' side. When it comes to the deputations, the agent, Georgina Doyle, is unable to be here. I think it's COVID related. And so we have Claire Clark in person. Thank you very much. Should there be anything, she will have the usual opportunity to answer any of your questions for 3 minutes. But if there is anything that is specific, we're hoping that Georgina will be available on screen to answer that. So we'll meet that when we come to it. And finally, perfectly reasonably, a member had asked about the addendum report and whether we were in order to take it. Again, legal advice, yes. We didn't come to any decision. Obviously, last time we didn't open the debate. So as with any other information, that is admissible this evening, and it's there for you in front of you. Councillor Oxley, yes.
Just to clarify, Mr. Chairman, because that's the addendum report to the 8th of March meeting, because there was an addendum report to the 15th of February, and I'm not sure where that is in relation to the addendum for the 8th.
Mr. Hodgett.
Yes, Chairman, that the information that was in the addendum for the previous meeting has been incorporated into the new report for this meeting. So the addendum is the addendum for tonight, but the previous one is incorporated.
Thank you very much, Councillor Oxley. So if I could now move to the agenda proper, apologies, please, Tom.
As you've set out, Chair, we have apologies recorded from Councillors Ball, Cross and Paul Brown this evening.
Thank you very much indeed. And again, for benefit of the members of the public, declarations of interest, Councillor Beggy.
Non-pecuniary interest due to living very close proximity to development. I have got an open mind coming into this meeting.
Thank you very much. And Councillor McCartney.
Thank you, Chairman. I know the applicants, but I'm, shall we say, not sufficiently interested in them for this to be a personal or prejudicial interest in any way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, those declarations are exactly the same as they were the first part. So we've now got petitions, deputations and questions, and we move on to the speakers. In a moment, there'll be Councillor Rizal, who is the second ward member, and it will be Claire Clark, as I said, as the applicant's representative. So if we now move then to the planning application, and again, I won't ask Mr. Hodgett to go into the same detail as before, but if you could just give us a brief one. Thank you, Mr. Hodgett.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. First of all, can I draw your attention just to the addendum, just to quickly cover what's contained in that this evening. You'll see on the first page, the inspector's report on the Oakham and Barleythorpe neighbourhood plan has now been received since the previous meeting. And the inspector looked at an objection that was raised by the developer to the important view number 11, which is shown on that plan at the bottom of the first page. And as you can see, the inspector has recommended that that important view is not included in the plan that should go to referendum. So that particular viewpoint is no longer or not relevant to the proposal in hand. With regard to the ecology, we'd updated it as far as we could before this morning. The agent did submit a biodiversity net gain metric this morning, which I did pass on to our ecology advisors, but unfortunately they weren't able to come back to me with any formal comments on it. But as you know, the Environment Act will, when this part of it does come into force in November next year, will require a 10% minimum net gain in biodiversity on a development site. And the net gain on this site that's been put forward in the metric from the applicant is habitat units is plus 24%. And hedgerow units is plus 21%. So it's more than double the requirement of the Act, even though it's not actually fully enforced at the moment. And as the report points out, whilst it isn't fully enforced, we are trying to negotiate those improvements in planning applications as they come in. And then there's some final comments that were received from Anglian Water today. And they require that additional condition to deal with foul drainage. So in the event that the application was approved, that would be an additional condition to add on to it. So quickly, I'll just go through the slides. There's the site on the southern side of Oakham, just beyond the Spinney Hill development. This is the site here. That's the view from the bottom corner, sort of where the neighbourhood plan view was taken from, looking towards Spinney Hill in the distance there, sort of a northwesterly direction. That's the back of Spinney Hill at the top. That's a closer up view of the houses that actually join the site. That shows the nearest footpath. And then there's another bridle way to the south that goes from Eggleton through to Brunston Road. That's the plan that showed the boundary of the conservation area, which is on the opposite side, and the planned limits to development as they stand at the moment. And then these were the plans, the sort of parameter plans that showed how the design had evolved and what actually was involved in it. So this is the final layout that's been submitted for approval. As we pointed out last time, it's designed around clusters of dwellings so that all dwellings are outward facing, and then you've got an area of open space and a footpath around the edge of the development, which is in line with sort of latest sort of urban design thinking, so that you don't get the backs of gardens backing onto public open spaces and onto roads, which is an unfortunate consequence of some developments in the past. So the access would be down at the southeast corner. It would be a tree-lined avenue into the site. The balancing area and all the open space would be provided in that southeast corner to help soften the appearance of the development as you come into town from the south. I don't need to go into any more detail on that, I don't think. I'll just skip through a few more. That one shows where the affordable housing will be in the green and the blue. And that's a drainage strategy which shows you that the drainage will come down into this surface water lagoon at the southeast corner. That was a plan I showed you last time because of the concern of neighbours on Spinney Hill, that shows the distances between their properties and the sort of road and the path in the new development, which all sort of exceed the requirements in the new adopted guidance. This is a view coming into Oakham, the application site on the left. And then these are some images of what the development would look like, actually sort of from inside the development. So this is the view along just off the inside of Uppingham Road. And that shows where the views were taken. And as you go into the site with the tree-lined avenue and the open space and the play area on the right. And we continue through to the further area of open space in the middle of the development here. And that's looking onto that open space, and you can see the road sort of splits around it. Again, same area. Back onto the Uppingham Road side. And I think this is a view that's on looking along this footpath, which backs onto Spinney Hill, view 7. Yeah, you can see it on the reference map at the bottom. And that's another view that shows the Spinney Hill development on the right. This was an earlier one, I think. I'm not sure. That doesn't show the footpath or any detail, but it just gives you an idea. These were some similar developments elsewhere. So in terms of the policy, I think we explained this last time. The situation, as you're aware, with the 5-year housing land supply, paragraph 11D of the MPPF is engaged. And as the report points out, it's not a carte blanche for approving development where there isn't a 5-year housing land supply. It does carry significant weight, but it has to be weighed up against the other policies that are still relevant in the local plan and the MPPF. So unless the approval of the development would be contrary and cause harm to those other policies, then the presumption is in favour of granting planning permission. And as we explained previously on this one, there are no technical issues that would stop the development proceeding, and it meets all the other general policies in the MPPF and the development plan. We talked about landscape impact. There's 38% green and blue infrastructure in this site. And as I said earlier, the open space where it's located sort of softens the impact of the development as you come into town. Conservation area was on the other side of Uppingham Road. Has no more impact on the site than on the conservation area than Spinney Hill would do. I don't know whether the conservation officer comments are in the report or not, but he certainly concurred with that view. Highway safety has been dealt with. The access would be safe. With regard to noise from the railway, I think that was covered in the previous addendum, and I think we've incorporated it into the report now. So the environmental health officer is content that noise from the railway can be dealt with satisfactorily by way of condition, but he also wants it validating after the measures, the attenuation measures have been put in. Sustainable drainage, where you've seen the surface water would drain off to that watercourse and be released into the existing ditch at existing greenfield rate. I've covered ecology in terms of the addendum. So we concluded that this is sustainable development on the edge of the most sustainable settlement in the county. It was to be recommended for approval in the examination local plan, so it's now recommended for approval at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Hodgett. Councillor Rozelle, if you'd like to come forward as the second ward member, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Committee and residents, both present and online. We last met to listen to the officer presentation representations on the 15th of February 2022. Fortunately, and thanks must go to the committee for their discussions that evening, it was determined that there was insufficient time left to hear the balance of the application, and it was rightly deferred until tonight. The views I express tonight are a representation of Oakham South residents, and I stand by those views and their position. This application is wrong for the Uppingham Road, and it is wrong for Oakham South. Mr. Chairman, Oakham, along with other wards in the county, including Ketton and Uppingham, are now facing the mallet of application frenzy. As a single ward, we are similar in size to a number of the villages in Rutland. Oakham South has experienced more than its fair share of planning going back to Brook Road, 40 houses, Braunston Road South, and more recently, interest in developing Braunston Road North. Mr. Chairman, you used the term hell on earth on February the 15th regarding another ward in the county. Oakham South is now looking down the barrel of its own Armageddon. In direct conversation with residents, they are angry and fed up with, I quote, the sweeping nods towards greenfield development in Oakham South Ahead of the obvious brownfield developments, NPPF Para 120C refers that we as a county hold as a priority. They are fed up with having to face increasing demand on broken infrastructure, and they have no faith that with application promises to grow infrastructure will be delivered when as a council we make decisions that turn down significant injections of infrastructure funding. Every week there are comments in the local media that share immense anxiety around road safety, loss of amenity, capacity challenges to schools of all ages, rising house prices, reductions in accessible green space, reduced access to health services, and a relentless sprint towards irreparable harm across the Oakham South community. Families that I speak to on a regular basis look to the planning committee to make decisions that support the quality of the places they live in. And today, Mr. Chairman, Oakham South feels let down and in some cases abandoned by what is viewed as a feeding frenzy on the remaining greenfield sites within the ward. Ironically, 120 metres from the edge of this proposed site, there is one of several very large signs that welcomes visitors to Oakham. Mr. Chairman, it says, Oakham, Rutland, Historic Market Town. It shows a picture of our town centre, but demonstrates, if we're not very careful, an idyllic reflection of yesteryear and what Oakham was, rather than what is rapidly becoming. Mr. Chairman, if we're not careful, the historic market town of Rutland will be consigned to part of our history as housing developments eat up every available space within the ward. The application in front of the committee tonight has a recommendation from officers which, in the view of local residents, does not address their concerns. Firstly, and recognised by this committee last month, the NPPF reminds us that in considering all applications, we should do no harm. Paragraphs 174188, conserving and enhancing the natural environment, speak at length about this, and it is of note that this committee have very recently made comment on do no harm in other areas of the county. Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Oakham South, as a ward, is considered in exactly that way. Further, residents of Spinney Hill have made detailed comments regarding loss of amenity and the effect that this application will have on their community. They deserve to be properly heard, have those concerns taken seriously, and be genuinely listened to. Mr. Chairman, you've heard already from significant numbers of residents in their deputations who live in Oakham South regarding this proposed development, along with a member of this committee not here tonight. They shared detailed arguments against this application, along with anxiety, sadness, and uncertainty, as the ward they have chosen to live in is eaten up by the relentless march of greenfield development. I agree with their reasoned argument and anxiety around the deterioration of this side of our historic market town. If the committee were to reach a decision tonight that supports the officer recommendation, then on behalf of Oakham South residents, I would ask that significant weight is given to conditions that ensure noise measures across the site commensurate with those applied to the recent Brook Road application, protecting future residents from the heightened and proven effect of noise from the expanding use of adjacent railways by freight trains. That proactive traffic calming measures and speed restrictions are applied directly to the Uppingham Road that offer focused protection to an ever-increasing localised population. That the geographical mix of housing types shown on the application and highlighted this evening are robustly challenged to the point where the smaller affordable component of the housing stock are given equal representation across the development, rather than being squeezed to the back of the site directly next to the noise of the railway. That the site amenity from neighbouring and new residents is such that it retains the principles of a greenfield site, providing specific and accurate green corridors that respect Spinney Hill, particularly the concern raised directly by residents of that development. and reflect all regulations pertaining to a greener environment, a cherished ecology, and a true representation of biodiversity net gain. The comments from a resident on the corner plot of Spinney Hill refer directly. Further, that the protection of property numbers percentages in accordance with policy relating to affordable housing are given priority as the development takes place. We should mitigate against any situation where, I quote, the affordable houses are not selling. The community infrastructure levy contributions are focused towards the needs of Oakham South through the Town Council, whilst appreciating that this is for the Town Council to determine. Mr. Chairman, in concluding and recognising that the committee will want to spend the majority of their time tonight debating the application rather than listening to me, I would ask them to consider the following. You recently referred to hell on earth as a descriptor of a place that is facing extreme numbers of large planning applications. My ward, Oakham South, is no different, and the access to school places and health facilities are no better. In fact, I would argue they are worse. I have the responsibility tonight of representing residents in a ward that is facing extraordinary growth without the relevant infrastructure. Residents are angry, they feel let down, and they are looking to this committee for support in protecting and retaining the gateway to Oakham, our historic market town. I would urge all committee members to think hard about their recent decisions and compare the Armageddon faced by Oakham South with the hell on earth referred to in your meeting of 15 February, just 3 weeks ago. The arguments, I would argue, are the same. The residents of Oakham have the same fears as those of Ketton and other areas across the county. We are already past the tipping point in this congested ward, and the harm referred to in the NPPF has particular relevance in this application. Please consider the volume of applications already approved for Oakham South by committee. Consider the effect on the remaining green space we cherish as a county, and perhaps reflect that we are custodians of this space for our children. I cannot support this application. It is wrong for Uppingham Road. It is wrong for Oakham South. I can only hope the committee are listening to Rutland residents. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rozelle. Members, questions for Councillor Rozelle, if you have any. Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just have clarity? I think you said that the residents of Spinney Hill will have lots of amenity.
That's right, Councillor.
Can you explain what you mean by that?
No, absolutely. I feel, talking to residents that live in that particular part of my ward, that they don't believe that their arguments have been listened to in regard to this application. And when they purchased their properties in Spinney Hill, they were under the impression that their amenity, their views, their plans, their life decisions that they made were good ones. Unfortunately, they're now in a position where that is severely imposed upon.
Have you supplementary, Councillor Dale? No, thank you. Any other members? No? In that case, thank you very much, Councillor Rozelle. Yes, Claire Clark, thank you.
I think we have Georgina with us.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Have we?
Georgina, if you can hear us, are you able to turn on your camera and microphone?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, a little bit louder if possible.
I shall see if I can
Sorry,
turn.
Andrew's just gone through to turn the microphone, turn the speakers up as well.
Thank you. We're just checking microphone this end.
I'll keep talking. Can you hear me now better?
Yes. Members? Okay. Yeah.
Yes, that's okay.
And again, I would say to you both, in the interests of fairness, because we have a very unusual situation, as you recognise, with one more member in particular, I am not going to be rigid on the 3-minute rule on this. And as far as it goes, members, without wishing to prolong it, if there are any unanswered questions or any points that you feel you haven't made, I'm perfectly prepared to be flexible on that. So having said that, it's this end or that end, I'm not quite sure.
I said, thank you, Chair. I just want to say a big thank you for letting me join virtually this evening. I very much appreciate it. So the idea was that I would speak, and it's just if there's any technical problems where you can't hear me, then Claire Clark will step in this evening to help and support the application. Is that okay?
Absolutely fine, yes.
I shall begin then. Thank you very much. And thank you, Chair. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Georgina Doyle and I'm a Chartered Town Planner and agent for this scheme. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening and especially virtually as well. The application before you is a full planning application for 84 homes, public open space and associated infrastructure. This application provides a high quality scheme with a wide range of house types and sizes. 25 homes will be affordable. That is 30% affordable provision. The development results in a substantial net gain in biodiversity, exceeding the target of no net loss and a positive of over 10% in line with the Environmental Act. This application will make SIL payments that will help deliver the infrastructure needed to support the development in the area. This SIL levy will include payments towards education, healthcare, highways and sports provision. The housing would be built by Davidson's Homes, who are a well-respected house builder with experience of successfully developing sites across the Midlands. Members and the Town Council should be assured that, as a company, Davidson's has a commitment to ensuring high-quality new developments on its sites, and its involvement in this site will deliver a high-quality scheme. They are rated as a 5-star builder in the HBF and NHBC Customer Satisfaction Survey. Davidson builds homes that are anything but standard. They don't build boxes, they build homes and places. The Davidson's brand standard is over and above all of their competitors. They are a legacy house builder who leave a quality environment behind when built. Architectural style is always supported by the use of materials and hard and soft landscaping to reflect the local vernacular. The site was proposed for allocation in the submission draft plan based on officers' assessment of the suitability of sites for development. The evidence base supporting the new local plan demonstrated that there were no overriding constraints to development and that the site is a suitable and sustainable development opportunity. Following the withdrawal of the plan and the lack of a 5-year land supply means that the presumption in favour of sustainable development applies, and housing proposals should be approved unless there are no adverse impacts that would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. We support the officer's report that confirms that the development is in a sustainable location on the edge of the county's most sustainable town, at the top of your settlement hierarchy. We also support officer confirmation that there are no objections from technical consultees and that there are no adverse impacts that would outweigh the benefits of providing houses in this area. Public consultation is a key part of what Davidson's do to ensure that development takes into account, as far as is appropriate and possible, local views and opinions. Prior to the submission of the application, we launched a website which provided information about the needs for development, the emerging proposals, and a virtual tour of the site. The website invited feedback on the proposals presented. A leaflet was also circulated to residents living within the vicinity of the development. There has also been consistent engagement with Oakham Town Council before and during the application process, including 3 face-to-face meetings prior to the submission of the application. The aim of this was to keep councillors informed and learn of any queries that they had. Following the submission of the application, we have sought to fully engage with nearby homeowners. We have met them on site and have sought to address any concerns that they raised, where appropriate, through a subsequent amendment to the planning application. We have also worked collaboratively with officers to improve the scheme, which has resulted in improvements to the layout and building materials used in line with the officer advice. I would like to thank your officers for their collaborative approach throughout the deliberation of this application and ask that you follow their recommendation as presented in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, are there questions? Councillor Oxley.
Yes, a question with regards to how to minimise the impact of the railway line, which will run across the back of the application site. What plans do you have to protect any residents from the noise from the railway lines?
Yes, thank you for that. So, but prior to the submission of the application, we worked on the design and layout through advice from our noise consultant, and made sure that the layout, particularly in the southwestern corner, was done in such a way so that housing faced away from the railway line. We were also recommended to then provide double glazing along the rear properties along the extent of that boundary, along the western boundary. We were also advised to provide noise minimising fencing as well as next to some of the gardens in that area.
Thank you. Supplementary?
Yes, supplementary with regards to planting. Were you considering planting along that edge to enable a wildlife corridor to run along the edge of the railway, and also to minimise the impact of the noise of the railway? Was that something you considered?
It wasn't a recommendation, no, but there is already existing vegetation along that corridor on the railways, on the railway ownership side. Then there is landscaping, and obviously there is distance then between the edge of the development and where the houses are going to be.
Thank you. Other members? Councillor Andrew Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. What provision are you going to make for electric vehicle charging points? I see that some of the parking in some of the housing on the left-hand side of the picture we've got on the screen, the cars seem to be parked, and there's a pavement in between that's the parking and the housing. Are you going to put any conduits in to accommodate wires, etc., to allow vehicles to be charged from the houses themselves?
There isn't any requirement at the moment to actually provide any vehicle charging points, but through the development of the site, we are going to give some consideration as to how we can make the site more sustainable by using such examples such as electric charging points. But this is something that will be developed through the prior to construction of the development.
Well, I'm quite surprised you haven't considered it, because we're all going to be using electric vehicles in the future.
Yes, I mean, what I mean by that is we haven't submitted a sustainability assessment to yourselves yet, and this is something that we would be keen or happy to have as a condition on the application, so that we can demonstrate to you how we're looking at achieving or improving our sustainability standards on the site in line with building regulations.
Councillor Blanksby. Sorry, Councillor Andrew Brown, you finished. Yeah, Councillor Blanksby.
Yes, could you tell me why the majority of the affordable housing is put next to the railway track, please?
That's just part of the design of the overall development. I mean, whilst the affordable units along that area, it's not purely affordable units, there are also private properties as well in amongst the mix along that western boundary.
Councillor Gordon Brown.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions on drainage, if you don't mind. First of all, I note that there's, as far as I can see in the documentation, maybe officers can confirm this, I don't see you've done any filtration tests on the site to allow drainage on site. You know, the hierarchy is you should do drainage on site first before you start allowing it to go off site. So that's my first point. Why are you not filtering the water on site? Second point on that, on the drainage, is I'm surprised that you've got the sewage pumping station right next door to the drainage pond and the exit of the water into the drainage ditch. All too much, we've got too much experience, particularly in my ward, of sewage stations, and in fact in other people's wards as well, of sewage stations failing and the water running into drainage ditches. I'm surprised they're so close together. So that's a question I've got. Why did you put it there? So I ask those two, and I'll come back with a third question in a moment, Chair, if you're happy with that.
Okay. To answer your first question, Councillor, there is a hierarchy on site. We have the surface water is drained through a mixture of pipes and swales. So you'll see the swales going around the western and the eastern boundaries to collect the surface water. That then gets contained within the pond to the south on the southern boundary, which is stored there before it then leaves the site through the culvert to be seen to the southeastern corner. So there is a hierarchy there, but there is also a condition on the application that asks for further detail on the actual drainage post permission. And then to answer to why the pump station is located there, that's because the site drains to a southeasterly direction, so that's where all the water flows to. So, and also it's where the connection to the sewer connection point is in that southeastern corner, hence why that pump station is located there. And forgive me, if I answered both of your questions, or was there a second?
No, I didn't answer my question why there's no filtration tests been carried out that I can find, and you're still pumping or allowing 11 litres per second to come off site, which I appreciate as the Q bar, but we shall leave that this now. Final question is on affordable housing in relation to market housing. I think Councillor Rozelle asked a question, and I shall ask it on his behalf, and that is, at what rate will you deliver the affordable housing in relation to the market housing? So at what stage will you deliver as against each number for affordable housing?
That will be through our agreement through the phasing. So when we work through the section 106 with your officers, we'll look at the phasing to ensure that we're not building the affordable housing all at the same time. But as you see through the layout, it's not possible to say build the affordable housing first or last. It will be phased as part of the overall phasing of the development. Does that help?
So you haven't actually done any cash flow calculations showing that the affordable housing will be done at certain times through the development? I'm surprised at the company of Davidson's capability. I'm very surprised at that.
Well, it won't be built on cash flow. It will be a bit built on the phasing. So as through the section 106 process, there's normally an agreement where a certain amount of affordable units are built. There are trigger points that certain affordable units are built at certain phases of the development to ensure it's not all built at the same time or not left until last.
Good. If it's not cash flow, then I look forward to having all the affordable houses in the first half of the development. Thank you.
Your question sorted. Councillor Brangsby.
Yes, could you tell me whether the green space is going to be adopted by the council, please?
Sorry, did you say when or where?
Is it going to be adopted by the council?
That's right, it will. Oh no, it's by it'll be a private management contract that will be taken over the open space.
It's a private management. What about the street verges? Are they going to be adopted?
They will be, yes. So the street verges with the street trees will be adopted by, if provided they're within the highway adoptions area, they'll be adopted by the Highway Authority.
Okay. Any other members? In that case, thank you very much indeed for your remote visitation, and thank you. We'll now move on to the debate. So members, over to you. I'm looking if either of the Oakham members wish to come in early or not, entirely as they wish. Members generally then. Councillor Brangsby.
I'll just make a point that the site next to them, the sociable housing was built the last. That's why it's right at the back of the site. They build it at the end.
Andrew Brown.
There was a question for highways, really. I mean, will the 30-mile-an-hour limit as you come into Oakham, will that be now moved, if this is approved, back to the to just by the bypass junction?
Can you come in, Mr. Smith? Yeah.
Yes, through you, Chair. The 30 isn't moving from its current location. They've been able to produce plans demonstrating that the visibility displays are in keeping with the speed that where the access is. Thank you.
Well, I think that road's currently 40, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Becky, sorry.
I think it's follow on to what Andrew was saying to some degree, because I'm on that footpath on the other side of the road, well, every day. And it is a very, very fast road, regardless of if it's 40 miles an hour. There's a lot more than that. If we have got quite a large number of new residents, trying to cross onto that footpath will be particularly dangerous, particularly the further out you get towards the Uppingham Road, because that's where the cars are at their fastest. Should there not be some consideration to some sort of crossing point at some point to allow residents onto what is a incredibly well-used footpath, which forms part of the bypass loop, as I suppose I would call it.
And highways, thank you.
On the approved plans, there is both pedestrian connectivity to the north and out of the site and across the road. Sorry, a crossing.
There is a crossing point.
A pram crossing point, yes.
Okay.
Councillor Oxley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a question for the officer with regards to phasing of the building, because the representative said that it's going to be built in 3 phases. Experience tells me that we have to be very mindful of the fact that each section has to be built in exactly the same way as the next section. As we've seen in Barleythorpe, where it started out larger and we ended up at the end of the development with a much smaller piece of ground to build the same number of houses on. So I just wanted assurances, if we are minded to give permission this evening, about how it will be overseen and to ensure that that is what we'll end up with at the end of the day.
Yeah, Chairman, this is the scheme that you're considering tonight. If in the future there's any change to it, a new planning application would be required, and you will have the opportunity to consider it. In terms of, just to touch on the affordable housing phasing, it is something that goes in the Section 106 agreement, which normally requires certain number or percentage of the affordable units to be built before so many percentage or a number of market dwellings are built, so that it ensures that they are delivered along the way and not right at the end, or you couldn't expect them all to be delivered at the front either. So the Section 106, in accordance with the Housing Strategy Officer, will make sure that is properly dealt with.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Councillor McCartney.
Thanks, Chairman. I did just about manage to stay awake during Councillor Paul Brown's speech on this 3 weeks ago, but he did raise a couple of good points about sustainability, and I just wanted, Nick, your opinion on this. Are these houses considered sustainable now with the use of gas boilers and without underfloor heating?
I think this is a point that we've made in the past, that there's no policy in the development plan that actually requires any other type of facility to provide energy at the moment. Houses obviously have to be built to the latest building reg standards, which are clearly quite higher than they used to be in terms of insulation and that sort of thing. But no, there's no compulsion in the policy for that to be done. Some developers do put solar panels on roofs as a matter of course, but there doesn't seem to be any indicated on this scheme at the moment.
Do you want to come back?
Thanks. And like Andrew, I'm pretty keen on some car charging points. Is that something that we can condition in? Are we able to have car charging points? And I think I'd be pretty keen to propose that as a condition if other members are agreeable.
We could condition it. It's a case of whether or not the applicant considers that it's a reasonable request. So it's something that we can perhaps raise. If you resolve to approve it subject to that condition, then we will have to go back to the developer and make sure that they are content with that. They would always have a right of appeal against a condition that they weren't happy with. But I think if we can seek it by negotiation.
I thought the agent said that they would be amenable.
Sorry.
I think during her discussion, I think that you were having, I think she was saying she would be amenable to a condition, which actually didn't mention that.
That's helpful that the agent had indicated that they would be amenable. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's unreasonable in 2022 to be expecting car charging points in new homes these days. So I think it'd be hard to argue against that.
Yes, Mr. Johnson.
I think there's a requirement for us to anyway agree conditions with applicants before issuing a permission, and as our legal officer said, they were willing and amenable to that. I think the discussion that we would obviously have to have with them is the percentage across the site, how many we would require. It would probably be unreasonable to require every dwelling to have them. I think in the past we've looked at sort of 10% and things like that, but again, a discussion to be had with the applicant. I think the building regs are likely to go down that route anyway and require, by the time it comes forward, it may well be that the building regs require them to have charging points anyway.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Yes, sorry, Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. There is a condition regarding the noise and double glazing being installed. How will we monitor ongoing noise and ensure that insulation is still adequate?
The condition on the advice of the Environmental Health Officer requires a verification report to be provided before the units are occupied to make sure that the measures that are taken to minimise noise intrusion are actually effective. And then clearly if they're not, then they'll have to do more work before that condition can be signed off.
Sorry, it's not ongoing monitoring, it's just an initial assessment.
Yeah, that's all you could reasonably expect it to be, I think.
Councillor Blanksby, thank you.
Just a point about that. Did she say double glazing or triple glazing? Because they have to have double glazing as it is. Every house has to have double glazing. So did she say triple glazing for the noise on the railway track side? I don't know. I thought she said triple.
I think she said double, but I think the reports may well say triple. In any event, I think the key thing is that the Environmental Health Officer will go out and get this verification report. So if it doesn't meet the standards of the report and our EHO's requirements, then they will have to do further works until it is suitable.
It was just a point really, because every house has to have double glazing in.
Other members, any? Councillor Gordon Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions for officers, first of all, just for clarification. Number one is the paragraph 63 in the report. I'm not too sure that I really understand that. Let me find it now. Yeah, a particular part on the second page. It's about the construction management plan from the highway. I think it's from the highways engineer. In the final comments, which is a bit more detailed and covers lighting in relation to public highway, etc., and tree protection. Are we happy that that is now actually in the conditions? Because that was a comment, and I wasn't too sure whether that had been clarified and included. Absolutely.
We can
Yeah.
certainly make sure that the latest one is the condition that goes on, which is what the Highways Authority
It just
required.
wasn't very clear in the paragraph 63 as to whether.
Yeah,
it was clear or not.
I'm not sure
Um,
offhand whether it's the latest one, but we can ensure that it is if.
Okay, so
it comes
if
to
that could be the case, that would be much appreciated. The next one, just for more for out of interest than anything else, the relative densities of the housing between the Spinney Hill development and this proposed development, houses per hectare. Would you know that offhand?
No, sorry.
Okay. Right. I mean, I've worked out that we got 27 houses per hectare on this development. Would that be about right, I think? Which is
the development plan initially called for 40 to the hectare in Oakham and Uppingham in the core strategy, and 30 in the villages, from what I recall. But that was overtaken because it's a bit dated now. It's been overtaken by the advice in the MPPF, which says that densities should be appropriate to the area.
Yeah, and I think that's why 27, it's relatively low density, that particular site, isn't it? That's what I thought. Moving on, just on electrical vehicle charging, the government announced in November last year that building regs will be modified this year, that all new developments must have a charging point. The timing of that particular piece of legislation, who knows now? But certainly that's the intention. So I think there is an intention of government to do that. It would not be unreasonable for us to ask the developer to provide that anyway. It's an absolute no-brainer. I question the loss of amenity. I think Councillor Rozelle mentioned this and it was questioned as well. The only amenity loss that I can see on this site is the one of a view. And as far as I recall, that is not a material planning consideration. Thank you. That's the only point I've got there. Councillor Rozelle also referred to the some of the issues in relation to previous applications. I note that this particular site is only 500 metres from the High Street in Oakham, which if you compare to the Cotsmore local plan, I think it says that no development should take place more than 800 metres from the development of the centre of the village. So 500 metres is well within even a small village like Cotsmore. So that's a point that I note. The other point is that this was in the draft local plan that was published in 2017. And at that stage, there was 16 statements in favour of the development, only 9 against. It was then again, of course, in the Reg 19 consultation. I haven't looked at those numbers, but it's been around for a long time, this particular site. And of course, it was approved by many councils as part of the local plan just a couple of, 2 years ago. February the 12th, I think it was, 2 years ago, if I remember correctly. So it was in the local plan quite clearly. I think from that point of view, the other site in Oakham South, which was also approved, was also in that same local plan, and this committee approved it. I am struggling to see, I've listened carefully to the comments from residents, from the councillors, both councillors, and I'm struggling to see real material planning considerations that would allow me to vote against this particular application. But I will listen to any other members who've got comments that would justify not approving this application this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Beggy.
Yeah, just a few points of clarity, if it's still possible. I'm just reading through, I've been reading through paragraph 101, which has extensive mention of including CCTV and ANPR at points within the site and including the entrance. Is this conditioned in as recommended by Leicestershire Police, and how will that be monitored and by who?
No, it's not conditioned in. It's again, there's no particular policy that requires us to do that, and we've not done it on any other development that's been recently approved.
I didn't recall seeing it before, but it was very clearly in here a consideration to use CCTV and ANPR.
Yeah, I think that's pushing the boundary a bit as what we can require them to do.
I think
Mr. Johnson.
Usually with the comments from the police liaison, we will always add them on as informative to make developers aware of them. But in this instance, I don't think it's something that we could insist on by way of a planning condition or section 106 agreement.
Should there not be some feedback then to these consultees to bring back things which are acceptable as opposed to pipe dreams?
I think they as with lots of consultation responses that we get, and again that we've had many discussions with the police, they will generally put on a standard, a list of informatives that they wish to see considered, but it's not something that like I say, we can insist on. Developers will come, sorry, not developers, consultees will come to us with, shopping lists of things that they would like to see if it's possible. But like I say, in this instance, I don't think it's something that we can reasonably insist on for a development of
Would
this
that be the
nature.
same for wheelie bin storage and cycle storage?
Again, in terms of that, the development's taken into account through the design. Suitable space. All of the properties have got reasonable gardens in order to store wheelie bins, etc. So again, if there were properties on there where we were concerned that there was going to be wheelie bins on the road frontage and nowhere to store them, then we'd negotiate that in the design. In this instance, the properties have got gardens, garages, etc., where all that sort of paraphernalia can be stored reasonably. So not something that we would be concerned about in this instance.
I think those comments from the police officer are fairly generic as well. They don't seem, when you read them, they don't seem particularly tailored to this particular development.
There's one about
They're very
commercial
similar,
smoking or something.
they're very similar to ones that we've had before. And as Justin said, if you've got bins, if you've got a lot of terrace properties, then you've got a problem with it. But I think with a layout like this, there's clearly adequate space for bin storage at the rear.
One final question. In the, I assume it must be the northwest corner, basically the corner of Uppingham Road. I note that it looks like the path or boundary enters and joins Spinney Hill, but in the report it says that cannot happen due to variance in ownership. Is there a connection? It does seem very strange that you have this path that goes all the way around and then does not join into Spinney Hill to allow connectivity between the two.
Well, no, there's no right to take a footpath link into Spinney Hill because it would have to go over private land through somebody's garden. Well, not through somebody's garden, obviously, but even that strip of land here at the entrance to Spinney Hill will be owned and managed by the Spinney Hill Residents Group in terms of their open space management. But you've got a footpath link through here out onto Uppingham Road at that point, and then another link out through at the bottom. So there's access out onto the top corner there in particular for access straight into town.
Is that corner there? It
Yes,
it just looks from that there is a connected path, but that's
no, it doesn't go into Spinney Hill. There'd be no possibility of going into there because of land ownership issues.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Beggy. Any other members before I look for a proposal in a moment? I would just add a couple of comments of my own. I have no great enthusiasm for this, but like Councillor Gordon Brown, the fact that it was in that 2017 draft plan and the fact that the broad thrust of policy is to develop on the market towns initially, at any rate, and it's a matter of is this proportionate? And I entirely appreciate that local feeling feels that it's disproportionate, but it's a matter of planning law. What I would say that it is heavily conditioned. I think we all have expressed concern about the noise and making sure that that is attenuated. Councillor McCartney, I think if your proposal for another condition is incorporated in that, and we may in a moment, we'll see how things go, but we may well ask you to put that in writing to the officer. And we heard what Mr. Johnson said about checking to see if that was amenable. And the other thing I would say, members, that those of us who sat here when Larkfleet was simply a little gleam in a developer's eye, and we were told that it was going to be developed in the local vernacular and with variety and so on and so forth, and without any reflection on members who may be living there and individuals living there. I think it is fair to say that what we were promised at the outset was not actually produced, let alone the various difficulties, which I won't go into now, as a result of that development. So I am taking as a sincere offer the comments made by the developer's representative. Councillor Banksby.
Yes, could we put something in about the phasing of the social housing, please?
Lead it then.
That will be covered in the section 106 rather than it be a condition on.
Okay, but it needs to be marshalled and they adhere to it because they haven't adhered to it on Barleythorpe.
Okay.
I think it's no use producing experience as a reason for making decisions if you haven't learned from the experience. Yes. Well, having said that, do I have a proposal from member, please? Councillor McCartney.
Thanks, Chair. I propose approval subject to an additional condition for minimum 1 electrical charging point per house.
Just checking that the governance officer and Mr. Johnson have got that.
Chairman, can I suggest there's actually wording come out from the Department of Energy, I think it was, whatever it is now these days, saying what they're planning to change the building regs to, and it might be that if we use the same words as that, it would be in line with government policy and therefore would not be unreasonable. I can certainly, I'm sure Justin will have that.
Yeah, I'm happy with that approach, and like I say, we can we'll agree the wording with the agent, and if it doesn't reflect what members are after, we'll bring the item back. I think that's all that we can say. Yeah, I think if you're happy in terms of numbers, if we do it in negotiation with yourself and the chair, but the starting position is in line with the building regs guidance. Okay.
Councillor Brangsby.
I seem to remember that if it's passed tonight, it's the building regs that when you pass it. Is that true? If it's passed tonight, if the building regs are changed, when it's passed, the building regs are what it's passed, you know.
No, I
the
think
time.
it will be when the development's taking place in terms of the building regs. Now, there might be a transition. There might be a transitional period in place for developments that are midway through and things like that. But again, I think we can deal with the wording through Councillor McCartney and with the chairman to make sure that what members are after is secured.
So it has duly been proposed, but I haven't had a seconder yet. Councillor Oxley, I saw just ahead of Councillor Brown, and all those in favour, please.
Unanimous, Chair.
That is unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. And 5 minutes past 8, more or less, I'll declare the meeting closed, and we have the pleasure of meeting again in a week's time. Thank you very much indeed, members. And thank you to members of the public who attended.
Whilst you're here as well, briefing for next week.
Oh, yes, yes.
Councillor Beggy. Oh, it's got mine. Justin's availability is Friday afternoon and midday on